300,000. That's how many people flooded into Florida in a single year. Now brace yourself. That number just crashed to 22,000, a 93% collapse in 12 months. Something is deeply wrong in the Sunshine State. Right now, in some of Florida's most famous, most beautiful towns, more people are packing up and fleeing than moving in. We're talking Miami, Naples, the Florida Keys, places people once dreamed about living, emptying out. And here's the part that'll shock you. It's not the hurricanes. It's not even the heat. The real reason is something quieter, sneakier, and honestly a lot more disturbing. A hidden financial trap that's quietly draining people's savings and forcing even wealthy retirees to run. By the end of this video, you'll know all 10 towns, and the one silent culprit nobody is warning you about. Number 1, Miami-Dade County. Let's start at the top, with the crown jewel of Florida, Miami-Dade County. Close your eyes and picture it. The glittering skyline, the turquoise water, the yachts, the nightlife, the billionaires. This is the place the whole world dreams about. So what I'm about to tell you makes almost no sense at first. In a single year, Miami-Dade lost more than 72,000 residents on net to other parts of the country. Let that sink in. That is the largest domestic outflow of any flood-prone county in the entire United States, and the biggest population loss on record for Miami itself. People aren't trickling out, they're stampeding for the exits. But here's the twist that makes this story so strange. While everyday families are leaving, Miami is actually gaining billionaires. Mark Zuckerberg reportedly spent $170 million on a single estate on a Miami island nicknamed Billionaire Bunker. So Miami isn't dying, it's transforming. It's slowly becoming a playground for the ultra-rich and a no-go zone for everyone else. Why? Two brutal words: cost and risk. Home prices in Miami have exploded 65% since just before the pandemic. On top of that, more than a third of all homes in the county sit in high flood risk zones. And the insurance? We'll get to just how insane that number is later. But trust me, it's the kind of bill that makes grown adults gasp. So imagine you're a nurse, a teacher, a young couple starting out. You do the math on a modest home, and the numbers simply don't work anymore. The mortgage, the insurance, the flood coverage, the constant repairs, it all adds up to a life you can't sustain. And that's the heartbreaking pattern you'll see repeated in every town on this list. The people who make a city run are the ones being pushed out first. Miami is just the loudest example, but it's far from the only one, and the next town might hit even closer to home. Number 2, Pinellas County. Now let's cross the state to the Gulf Coast, to Pinellas County, home to the postcard-perfect towns of St. Petersburg and Clearwater. For years, this was one of Florida's great success stories. Sugar-white beaches, a booming art scene, retirees and young professionals pouring in. Growth, growth, and more growth. And then, it stopped. For the first time in years, Pinellas County posted a net outflow of residents, losing more than 9,000 people to other parts of the country in a single year. The growth engine that ran for a decade suddenly threw itself into reverse. So what broke the streak? The answer has a name: Hurricane Helene, which slammed the region in late 2024 and left behind a trail of destruction. But here's the crucial insight. And pay close attention, because this is the part most people miss. It wasn't just one storm that emptied out Pinellas. It was something more corrosive. It was storm fatigue. Think about what that actually means for a family living there. You clean up after one flood. You fight your insurance company for months. You finally repair the damage, drain your savings, and then the very next season, forecasters point another spinning monster right at your doorstep. Nearly 36% of homes in Pinellas sit in high flood risk zones, so this isn't paranoia. It's a legitimate, repeating nightmare. At some point, exhausted homeowners stop asking, "How do we rebuild?" and start asking, "Why are we still here?" The emotional toll piles on top of the financial toll, and eventually the scale tips. They sell, they pack, they leave. And notice the ripple effect this creates. As people flee flood-exposed Pinellas, nearby lower-risk areas, like Pasco County just to the north, start to benefit. This is the beginning of a quiet reshuffling of the entire map of Florida. Pinellas is the canary in the coal mine. When a decade-long boom flips to bust after a single storm season, it's a warning sign that the whole state should be paying attention to. And the next town proves this is happening even to the wealthy. Number 3, Collier County. If you've ever fantasized about the ultimate Florida retirement, you've probably pictured Naples, the beating heart of Collier County. We're talking manicured golf courses, upscale boutiques, five-star restaurants, and some of the most stunning, exclusive coastline in all of America. This is old money paradise. This is where people go when they've made it. So brace yourself because Collier County landed squarely on the top 10 list of flood-prone counties losing residents. Wait, why on earth would people flee paradise? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Even paradise has a price tag, and in Naples that price tag went completely vertical. Home prices here have nearly doubled since just before the pandemic. Nearly doubled. A place that was already expensive became almost mythically unaffordable in just a few short years. Now stack the second weight on top, insurance. Collier County is coastal, low-lying, and heavily exposed. More than half of its homes face high flood risk. That means insurance premiums that don't just sting, they stagger you. And here's the thing that surprises people most. This is hitting the wealthy too. We tend to assume rich buyers can absorb any cost. But even affluent homeowners started doing the cold, hard arithmetic and asking a question that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. Is this beautiful view actually worth an unpredictable, never-ending, always climbing bill? And for thousands of them, the answer quietly became no. That's what makes Naples such a fascinating and revealing case. It shatters the myth that the Florida exodus is only about people who can't afford it. When the rich start leaving a place as gorgeous and prestigious as Naples, it tells you the problem isn't just poverty, it's that the entire math of coastal living has fundamentally broken. The dream didn't die because Naples got ugly. It died because the cost of the dream outran the joy of it. But if you think Naples is dramatic, wait until you see what's happening in a place where there's literally nowhere left to run. That's next. Number 4, Monroe County. Now picture the most laid-back, sun-soaked, margarita-in-hand slice of America you can imagine. The Florida Keys, officially known as Monroe County, with the legendary Key West at its tip. This is the place where the mainland melts away, where the highway floats out over the ocean, where people go to escape the entire rest of the world. But here's a statistic that should stop you cold. In Monroe County, over 93% of homes face high flood risk. 93%. Read that again. Think about what that number truly means. In most towns on this list, when your neighborhood floods, you can at least move a few miles inland to higher, safer ground and stay in the same county. But in the Keys, there is no higher ground. There's almost nowhere safe to relocate to within Monroe County because nearly every single property is exposed. So people aren't just leaving their neighborhoods. They're leaving the entire island chain. When you can't escape the risk by moving across town, your only real option is to escape it by moving away completely. And then comes the second gut punch, price. The median home price in Monroe County hovers around $1 million. So you've got the most extreme flood exposure in the state, combined with a price of entry that locks out almost everyone who isn't wealthy. That's a brutal, suffocating combination. The result is a slow, quiet transformation that breaks a lot of hearts. The Keys are becoming a place you visit, a bucket list vacation, a long weekend of sunsets and seafood, rather than a place the average person can actually afford to stay and build a life. The soul of a community is its permanent residents, the teachers, the fishermen, the shop owners, the families who've been there for generations. And when those people get priced and flooded out, what's left behind isn't really a town anymore. It's a very beautiful, very expensive postcard. Monroe County shows us the extreme edge of this crisis, but our next town proves it's spreading like dominoes. Number 5, Broward County. Let's head back to the Atlantic coast, just north of Miami, to Broward County, home to the vibrant canal-laced city of Fort Lauderdale. Once nicknamed the Venice of America for its miles of scenic waterways, Broward has always sold itself on one irresistible promise: water, water everywhere. But that very promise is now becoming its biggest problem. Broward shares every single pressure that its famous neighbor Miami is buckling under. Sea level rise creeping higher every year, storm surge that threatens with every hurricane season, and perhaps most unnerving of all, king tide flooding, where seawater bubbles up through the storm drains and floods the streets on perfectly sunny days with no storm anywhere in sight. Imagine wading through salt water to reach your car under a cloudless blue sky. That's not a distant future. That's happening now. And now for the number I've been teasing this entire video, the insurance figure that truly explains everything. Florida is officially the most expensive state in America for homeowners insurance. The average premium now tops $8,000 a year, and it jumped a staggering 18% in a single year. $8,000 before you've paid a cent of your mortgage, your taxes, or your flood coverage. Now you understand the domino effect that Broward represents so perfectly. When one coastal county, Miami, becomes financially unbearable, the pressure doesn't just vanish. It spills over into its neighbors. Broward can't escape the same sea, the same storms, or the same insurance market that's crushing the entire region. This is the part people don't grasp. This crisis isn't a series of isolated problems in separate towns. It's a connected wave rolling up and down the coastline, town by town, each one feeling the strain from the last. One county's collapse becomes the next county's warning. So when you see the numbers falling in Broward, don't think of it as Fort Lauderdale's private struggle. Think of it as another domino tipping over in a long, connected chain, and the wave is still moving. Our next stop shows it reaching inland. Number 6, Hillsborough County and Tampa. Now here's where a lot of people thought they'd found the loophole, the clever escape hatch. If the coast is the problem, the flooding, the surge, the sky-high premiums, then surely the answer is simple, right? Just move a little inland. Head to Hillsborough County, home to the booming, bustling city of Tampa. Problem solved, except not quite. Here's the inland illusion that's catching people off guard. Tampa and the surrounding Hillsborough area are increasingly facing their own flood and storm surge pressures. Being off the immediate beachfront doesn't make you immune. Low-lying land, rivers, heavy rainfall, and surge potential mean that inland in Florida is a lot more relative and a lot more risky than newcomers assume. The safety people thought they were buying isn't always as solid as the brochure promised, but Hillsborough tells us something even more important than that, and it's genuinely a good news signal buried inside this whole crisis. Buyers are finally getting smart. 5 years ago, almost nobody researched flood risk before buying a Florida home. They fell in love with the palm trees and the pool and signed on the dotted line. Not anymore. Today's buyers are pulling up FEMA flood maps before they make an offer. They're checking a property's exact elevation. They're looking at climate risk scores for the specific address, not just the general town. They're asking hard questions about insurance history and past storm damage. This is a massive behavioral shift, and it changes everything about how the market works. Information that used to be buried in fine print is now front and center in people's decisions. And once buyers start pricing in risk, sellers can no longer hide it. So Hillsborough is a fascinating in-between case, a place that shows both the limits of the just move inland escape plan and the rise of a more educated, more cautious buyer who refuses to be caught off guard. The takeaway? There's no magic safe zone. There's only informed choices. And our next town proves that affordability can flip the whole story. Number 7, Lee County. Now let's talk about Lee County, home to Cape Coral and Fort Myers, because this town flips the entire narrative on its head, and the lesson it teaches is maybe the most important one in this whole video. First, the painful part. Lee County took an absolutely devastating direct hit from Hurricane Ian in 2022, one of the most destructive storms in Florida's history. Entire neighborhoods were flooded, homes were torn apart, and the region is still spending years, digging out and rebuilding. If any place on this list had every reason to empty out, it's Lee County. So here's the plot twist that surprised even the experts. Lee County is actually gaining residents again. That's right. Despite the trauma, despite the flood risk, despite everything Ian did, people are still moving in with a net inflow of thousands. In fact, Lee County posted one of the biggest population gains of any flood-prone county in the country. How is that even possible? One word: affordability. Lee County is significantly cheaper than glamorous Naples right next door, or Miami across the state. And it turns out that price is the single most powerful force in this entire equation. When a place is affordable enough, buyers are willing to accept the climate risk. When it's not, like in Naples or the Keys, they flee. This is the crucial, game-changing insight of the whole story. It's not the risk alone that's emptying out Florida's towns. It's risk plus unaffordability. Take away the crushing prices, and even a heavily storm-battered county can bounce right back and thrive. Number 8, the Orlando Metro. Now we take a hard turn away from the coast and away from everything you might assume about this crisis, because our next hotspot isn't on a beach at all. It's smack in the middle of the state, the Orlando metro area, home of the theme parks, the tourism capital of the world. No oceanfront, no king tides, no storm surge crashing over the seawall. So what on earth is going wrong in Orlando? According to reporting from the Wall Street Journal, Orlando is quietly hemorrhaging a very specific and very alarming group of people: prime-age workers, the folks under 44 years old. And it's not just Orlando. Naples and Panama City are showing the exact same disturbing pattern. Now, why should that terrify anyone paying attention? Because these aren't wealthy retirees cashing out. These aren't snowbirds heading home for the summer. These are the people in their prime working and earning years, the backbone of the entire local economy. Think about who that actually is. It's the nurses in the hospitals, the teachers in the schools, the cooks, servers, and hotel staff who make the tourism machine run, the young families just trying to build a future. And when those people decide they can no longer afford to live where they work, something deeply broken is happening beneath the surface. Here's the domino effect, the inland version. When workers can't afford housing near their jobs, businesses can't find staff. Services slow down. The whole town begins to hollow out from the inside, not from floodwater, but from a plain and simple affordability crisis. Rising home prices and cost of living, with wages that just couldn't keep pace. This is why Orlando might be the most important warning on this entire list. It proves that Florida's exodus isn't only a climate story. In many places, it's a raw economic story. Young workers doing the math and realizing the numbers don't add up, no matter how far from the coast they live. And the next town shows how storms compound that exact pressure. Number 9, Panama City and the Panhandle. Let's travel up to Florida's northern edge, the Panhandle, and specifically to Panama City. This stretch of Florida has a different flavor from the glitzy South. More small town, more working class, famous for its emerald green water and sugar sand beaches. But it's also carrying a quieter, heavier kind of exhaustion. Panama City is a place that's still recovering from years of brutal storm damage. And this is where the story stops being about spreadsheets and starts being about people who are simply worn down. Here's a finding that adds real scientific weight to what's happening. Research from the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, that's serious, credible economic research, not speculation, studied migration in Florida's Panhandle after hurricanes. And what they discovered is heartbreaking. The residents who were hit hardest by the storms were the most likely to pack up and relocate. But there's a cruel twist buried in that data. Those same displaced residents were least likely to end up somewhere better than where they started. Sit with that for a moment. It means the storms aren't just pushing people out. They're often pushing the most vulnerable people into situations that don't actually improve their lives. This isn't a story of families upgrading to their dream home. It's frequently a story of people being forced out, scattered, and landing somewhere lateral or even worse. This is what I call the quiet migration, and it's the part of the crisis that gets almost no headlines. There's no dramatic single moment, no viral video, just a slow, grinding erosion, storm after storm, repair after repair, bill after bill, until one day a family that's lived somewhere for decades finally looks around and thinks, I just can't do this anymore. Panama City reminds us that behind every migration statistic is a human being who reached their breaking point. It's not always about the wealthy weighing their options. Sometimes it's about ordinary people who were simply worn down until leaving became the only choice left. But our final town? This is the one nobody warned them about. Number 10, the condo belt. And now, number 10, the one I promised would genuinely surprise you. Because this isn't about hurricanes or flood maps or beachfront prices. This is the silent culprit hiding in plain sight, and it's hitting some of the most vulnerable people in Florida, retirees in the state's coastal condo towns. To understand this, we have to go back to a tragedy. In 2021, a condo tower in Surfside catastrophically collapsed, killing dozens. In response, Florida passed a sweeping new law, House Bill 913, that took full effect on July 1st, 2025. And on paper, it sounds completely reasonable, even essential. It requires older condo buildings to complete milestone safety inspections and to fully fund their structural reserves. The savings pool meant to fix aging concrete, roofs, and foundations. Sounds sensible, right? Here's the devastating catch that almost nobody saw coming. The law lets condo boards levy enormous special assessments and even take out loans without a vote from the unit owners. That means a retiree living quietly on a fixed income can suddenly open their mailbox and find a bill for tens of thousands of dollars. No warning, no vote, no choice. Pay it or face losing your home. Now imagine you're 75, living on Social Security and a modest pension, and your condo board hands you a $40,000 surprise assessment. You simply can't pay it. So what happens? You're forced to sell, and here's the final cruelty. Condo prices are actually dropping because of this exact fear. The median condo price fell to around $285,000, down more than 8% in a single year. So you're forced to sell at a loss into a market that's sinking because of the very law that's forcing you out. That's the trap. The dream of an affordable, worry-free Florida retirement turned into a financial vice with no escape. And that, more than any storm, is quietly emptying out Florida's condo towers. Now let's tie all 10 of these together, because the real reason is bigger than any single town. So after all 10 towns, what is the real reason Florida is emptying out? It's not one villain, it's a devastating triple squeeze. First, insurance. The most expensive in the entire country, topping $8,000 a year on average, and still climbing. Second, the cost trap, soaring home prices, rising HOA dues, and that brutal condo law, HB 913, hitting fixed income owners with bills they never agreed to. Third, climate and flood fatigue, the exhausting, endless cycle of storms that makes owning a home both pricier and more unpredictable. In fact, a Redfin survey found that fear of natural disasters is now the fourth most common reason Americans move, ranking higher than moving for a new job. Stack those three forces on top of each other, and even paradise starts to empty out.